Sherry Rehman, a Pakistani politician and member of Senate of Pakistan. For her work on human rights and peace, she has won International Human Rights Commission Award and is also the recipient of Nishan-e-Imtiaz, Pakistan's highest civilian honor. She started her professional career as a journalist, and her tremendous work and efforts gained her the title of Democracy Hero and made her name in 100 Most Influential Asians. Let's hear from her about her incredible life journey.
I was born in Karachi, Pakistan.
Yes.
Very much a Karachi person. My entire schooling was in Karachi. I became, I think, editor of the Star magazine at age 20. And that we turned it into a feminist magazine in many senses, and especially during the weekend. And it was really a very huge learning experience for me, and also gave me a sense of what I want to do when I come back from college. At that time, I always wanted to be a journalist. I had a very strong interest in public interest journalism, always from school, and I'd always had a very strong interest in reading as well. So that has continued as a lifelong passion, and my love for books also and libraries continues in all my homes. Early life was quite instrumental, especially the years in journalism, in defining who I became later. It exposed me to absolutely a whole new range of issues that, for a young person,
Yes, ma'am.
At the front row, in a kind of journalism puts you in the front row of history as it writes the draft, and journalism, in my mind, is the first draft of history. So we were in those difficult times in the front row of a very tense and fractious time for Pakistan, with a dictator running the country and promoting regressive laws. There was a vast amount of formal censorship which we encountered. So I would be every day at the High Court after school to pick up my father before we went home for lunch. And my first words when I was 5 years old, I was trained to say constitutional law as a tongue twister. My mother was the first vice president of the state bank, woman vice president, and she worked all her life. So I grew up in a household that not just encouraged women to work and go out there and be part of change, but also expected everyone to contribute to society. It was an expectation that we were fulfilling, and the only thing that my father said he would give me, instead of people get jehazes and fancy weddings, I was given a good education, and I was very grateful for that. In turning as a journalist, I was talent hunted by the Dawn Group from grammar school directly during our exams, and they chose 3 of us. I was selected amongst the entire class, and I then stayed there for 2 years to become editor of the Star magazine.
How did the political unrest in Pakistan impact you in a way that gained you the title of Democracy Hero?
I was set to go on a scholarship to Columbia, and I had also Bryn Mawr. These were 2 women's the colleges I had applied to, but I delayed them by a year because I got so involved in learning in a very strong and what I call a learning curve that took me through a quantum leap of literally exposure to Pakistan's very changing, charged political landscape, where democracy was under fire, and so was the freedom of the press. They were seen as interlinked. They were inextricably interlinked. And they taught people like me the value of standing up to be counted, the value of public, of evolving a public voice that spoke first about the underprivileged, and foremost about values that underpin democracy. I understood even then that everything would not become perfect with democracy. It has tremendous flaws in its, but those flaws are in how we lead the governance of the laws we make. And so I got involved in public life as such in Pakistan, in women's activism, in media activism. At that very young age, we were always finding our way inside police lockups for protesting restrictions on women's rights and restrictions on media freedoms. Because those days one saw a certain kind of state censorship that are sometimes unimaginable to today's media. But today too, we see a great deal of censorship in multifarious ways. But also we have many different media platforms than we did those days. Those days there were only print newspapers, and they were the only source of information, really. Radio and television were both a state monopoly. There was no private channels. So you got fed a diet of state-aligned, state-led news, state-curated news, and then certain newspapers that stood up to even give the news as opposed to have an opinion on it were treated badly, as were their journalists. And of course, anybody who wanted to be counted as an independent journalist was also keen to be seen, to be counted in the ranks of those who seek the restoration of democracy. There was the ARD, the Alliance for Democracy movement, and then there was the MRD, the Movement for Restoration of Democracy. These were large political alliances that linked even with civil society and the media to come out and build pressure and oppose the military regime of Zia-ul Haq, which transformed or attempted to transform Pakistani society over 11 years of brutal and tough laws and a change, trying to change the culture of Pakistan, shrinking social spaces for dissent, for democracy, for any voices that deviated from the establishment writ of what constituted Pakistan and its ideology.
Can you tell us about your transition from a journalist to becoming a politician? And was there any specific incident that led the change?
And the Herald was a path-breaking news magazine. I was very proud and excited to be its editor. I stayed editor for 10 years. And then after 10 years exactly, I left myself because I felt that I needed to amplify my voice and take a break from constantly editing and sort of start writing myself. So I was writing a few columns and processing change. And it was a time of tremendous change. Pakistan had gone through a decade of democracy and governments that fell. 4 governments had fallen in front of me, 4 elections. So those Herald years were heady years of, again, quantum learning and experiencing political changes and democracy, again, from the front row, but not as a participant. However, I was not keen to join politics until I met the former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto a couple of times in her second government. And she was extremely charismatic and very motivational. And we continued talking. I remember in 2001, she said to me that the general elections are coming up and I should apply for a Senate seat in her party. And I said, but I'm not a politician. And she said, no, I want people like you. I've asked Asma Jahangir, Hina Jilani and yourself to join the party. I want outspoken, high integrity women to join. And we will give you the Senate seats. So It took me a while. She even came to my family to convince me and my husband, and she said this is a family decision. At that time, my husband was living in London, and I was there too for a year. But I moved back.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I said you can't represent. Yeah, I said you can't represent a country by remaining. I have to move back. So I moved back.
Yes.
In 2002, but she then said I have to become a member of the National Assembly because the women's seats came up.
Right.
So I joined there as a member of the National Assembly in 2002. Benazir Bhutto was a force one just did not say no to. And she was extremely, as I said, inspiring, motivational. And she, until the day she died, she continued to mentor me personally.
Yes, ma'am.
Which was a transformational, really decade for me.
What struggles did you face in your professional journey?
In outside the home, of course, life can be very, very fraught, and it's a daily battle to navigate one's space and keep pushing for the right to have a seat at the table.
Yes,
while women do a lot of work, they are rarely given the chance to actually take decisions and effect change. So I was very lucky that it was a decision. It wasn't quite luck. I mean, had it not been Benazir Bhutto, I would not have joined politics. Certainly not.
Yes, ma'am.
And her party has given me that kind of space and tolerance to grow. Obviously, everything hasn't been perfect. There have been episodes where I've disagreed. I've even resigned from 4 cabinet posts when I was minister. But I remained loyal to the party, and 2 years later, they asked me to become ambassador to the United States. Since then, I've been very much in holding some post or the other. They made me the first leader of opposition in Pakistan in the Senate, a woman, which was, I don't think any other party would take that risk. They were at the risk of losing a couple of religious and tribal votes, which we didn't in the end, but they took that risk. They could have, because we didn't have to fight the numbers in the House.
Yes, ma'am.
So these kind of things happen. It's the political culture of the party that you're in that can change your experience. So the PP has defined my experience in mainstream politics. They not just protect women, they empower them. I mean, I'm hardly in a position that I require protection. I should be seeking to protect others. That is the whole point of amplifying one's voice and seeking space to effect change. I never signed up to be citing only women's issues, but I felt that it was my responsibility as a woman politician to also constantly espouse women's rights, to keep pushing for discrimination to end, and for giving vulnerable women an opportunity to have the same choices that empowered women have. And in any way, power is very negotiable, but women have to have choice, the opportunity to make choices. That means an education, access to healthcare, and the removal of laws that discriminate against them.
As you mentioned earlier, that Benazir Bhutto encouraged you to enter into politics, and she had a charismatic personality. So we'd love to learn more about how she mentored you.
She was the reason I joined politics, and her party is the reason I stayed in many ways, her son as well. It's been a very tough journey. Even when she was in exile, every day she would send me an email by 9 a.m. and we would be closing very often some of our conversations at 2:30 in the night. She was a workaholic, and that is something we both had in common. So, especially once she acquired the BlackBerry, which was new in those days.
Yes.
These new communication tools also empowered her to be literally amongst us in making decisions every day. And she made all the decisions on email, on telephone. I remember writing the manifesto 2007 elections with her. A couple of times I went to Dubai, but it was one of the most exhilarating experiences to be able to shape policy with somebody who is committed to effecting change and thinks public policy should drive all interest and should drive all change. And so it was a politics that really mattered, because you were staying up in the night thinking, oh, how to, for instance, how to send children to school where from homes where they can't afford to send them. They in Pakistan, a lot of children are put out to work because the families can't afford to send them to school, and they also want another income. So there we were up in the night thinking, oh, how should we do that? And I remember getting a call from her 2:30 a.m. one day, and she said, oh, I've just thought about what you said. Let's do this thing called Apna Ghar. And out of that came the Sweet Home model that you may have heard of in Islamabad.
Yes.
It's a large kind of orphanage where children are taught and raised for professional life, with no gender discrimination, and given dignity and the chances that they might not have had in other places. So these are the kind of things that we would be working at. What you see as the Benazir Income Support Program, for instance, came out of a lot of thinking on telephones, on committees, sitting here and phoning her, and we are saying, oh, we need a massive cash transfer or employment program for Pakistan. Hote, it became the Benazir Income Support Program. By the time we came into government, she had already been martyred, and we named it after her. She spent 2-3 years trying to make this program realizable, and it was one of the first commitments we had to the people of Pakistan and her vision. So she goes on with us literally to this day. And just before you, I was on a policy meeting on the phone, on Zoom, with 6 colleagues who, this was not a formal meeting, we were just talking, but these are habits we developed over the years with her, that, to keep also discussing long-term issues and not just do reactive politics, to propose ways out and to look at things in a broad theoretical fashion, apply them to real life, see how they can make a visible difference to people's lives in countries like Pakistan. So it's very uphill, it's very long, it's a long task, and sometimes it's very unrewarding to be in politics because people just throw things at you and they throw everybody's mud at you.
Yes,
and you stand there feeling completely, demotivated sometimes. And then I think of how we used to work, and I carry on.
You have spent more than 10 years of your life towards journalism. Do you miss that part of your professional journey?
Spent more than 10 years. I spent 2 different parts of my life as a journalist, and I've never stopped writing. Even last week I had a column in the news.
Yes, ma'am.
So no, I think that's something that has that has grown a vein in my body with ink in it somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't think I'll ever go of that. That was my first love, and I think it continues to be.
Like many other countries, Pakistan faces the same problem of underrepresentation of women in the government and other institutions. What message do you have for women who want to enter politics?
Well, never be afraid to push the envelope. Never be dissident about what you think is your worth. Don't let others define you. Go out there and, be the change. Go out there and instead of talking about it, elect to do something. Even if it's small, it's anything mobilizing your community. It doesn't have to be at the federal or national level right away. Whatever small increment you can invest of yourself in any public forum or creating space in public life, do it. Don't stand back. Don't listen to people who push you back. And don't be afraid to seek your place, your right to be at the table, because eventually you have to earn that right. And if you find that you're being pushed aside because you're a woman and your gravitas has to be invented every day, well, then do it. I'm still doing it after 20 years in politics.
Very rightly stated. Don't let others define you. Don't stand back. And don't listen to people who push you back. Sherry Rehman, a Pakistani politician and member of Senate of Pakistan.